To catch someone who's been kidnapping and killing drug smugglers, Crockett and Tubbs hire Glenn Frey to fly them to Colombia to buy a bunch of cocaine. Cocaine? Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike Burnett, and I'm here with my partner, Rico Cooper.
Hey, everybody.
And here we are at Season 7, our premiere, and we're going to be talking about Miami Vice.
Yeah, it's Season 7. We still haven't found Calderon.
Do you want to find him because he's a bad guy, or for vengeance?
I just want to find him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much,
I
hadn't thought it through yet. Yeah.
Also, I've been told Martin Castillo might be popping by for a visit. Well,
I would certainly hope.
In fact, he might already be here. It's hard to tell.
Well, then in that case, I'll definitely be on my best behavior throughout this episode.
He could just be standing in a corner somewhere.
He would make his presence felt in some manner, I'll bet, though.
Yeah.
We would detect him some way.
Yeah. So I guess before we get into it, well, we should remind people of our website and our social media and all that jazz.
That's right. We got battleofthenetworkshows.com.
Correct.
Of course, you can get this podcast wherever you got it this time and wherever you get podcasts. But if you go to the website, you can get so much more, including, our blog posts, information about upcoming episodes, polls, all kinds of things. So I would recommend everybody start your Battle of the Network shows journey on the website if you can.
Correct. And we have a Facebook page and a Facebook group. And the Facebook group, we have a lot of fun discussion about 70s and 80s TV.
Yeah, and I think it's appropriate to mention that we're not just talking about ourselves and about the podcast. We're talking, like you said, about 70s and 80s TV in general, and we have a good time. We got some great friends on there already, and we're always looking to grow that. So come on and visit us, and there's just a very simple step to join.
Yep.
It's really just a formality, and then get you right in there, and then you can participate and have some fun talking about TV with us.
Yeah, and Facebook will know even more about you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know anything about that, but
we're on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube, where you can hear episodes right there, or you can watch the playlists that Rick curates for based on each episode of various clips and things we referenced.
That's right, including for this very episode.
That's right.
Every episode of the show, we do put together a list of relevant videos, commercials, promos, all kinds of surprises. So check us out there on our official YouTube channel, as well as enjoying episodes of our podcast if you wish to watch them on YouTube.
All right. I guess we should get into Miami Vice. It's taken us a while to get to this show.
It has.
Although, I don't know, do we want to break?
Pull back the curtain.
Pull back the curtain. Back when we were first working on this, before we released any episodes, we recorded a few episodes, and a couple we didn't feel make the cut.
They weren't up to our high standards of quality.
That's right.
We don't want to release anything if it's not up to our highest standards.
Yeah.
It's like we don't want to put out product that's on the street unless it's vetted by us and that we know that it's, if not necessarily totally pure, that it's good quality stuff.
99%.
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So, so we did a Miami Vice episode, and it felt a little stepped on.
Right.
And another one, which we won't mention right now, but...
Yeah.
So that's been lost to the mists of time, but we're coming back now. Because, if you're going to talk about 70s and 80s TV, you have to talk about Miami Vice.
Yeah, I think so. I was thinking about this earlier today, as a matter of fact. If you ask somebody what show defines the 1980s, Miami Vice would have to be probably in the top 5, right?
Yeah.
Yet, if you did like a conventional metric like ratings or number of episodes or awards, Miami Vice wouldn't necessarily be on that
Right.
list. But as far as a category of like iconic, decade-defining shows, Vice has to be in there.
Yeah, just based on fashion and parody and the added use of the word vice,
Yeah,
the added use of the word Miami, much like Beverly Hills
right.
in that period became an adjective.
Yeah,
So did Miami, but definitely the fashion and the style and the filmmaking style.
I think it has an enduring legacy, way beyond maybe some of those conventional metrics.
Yeah,
And fortunately for us, I think as we revisit, it also happens to be a very entertaining series.
yeah,
And I think maybe it gets a little bit less credit as a show, as a work of art, for lack of a better word,
yeah.
than it deserves.
I might call it a work of pop art,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I'll just go ahead and put this out there, and then we can come back to it.
Uh-oh.
You would think going into it that the style and that stuff wouldn't hold up, that would be the part that didn't work.
Right.
I felt like that actually did. Like in the context of the show, it feels legit for the most part. While at the same time you have that what was going on in the 80s. Why were people dressing this way?
Yeah.
But and the filmmaking style I think holds up partly because it was adapting things from MTV, but then it fed into things that are still I think part of the television landscape and advertising and videos, and it didn't go away.
Right.
Maybe it changed, but it's part of that continuum. I feel like the cop show part of it, while it's fine and it's entertaining, is not that revolutionary.
Right.
The 70s cop shows were dealing with at least some of the subject matter, and and certain episodes definitely just feel like it's just okay, they're in a speedboat instead of a car, but
Mm-hmm. Right.
otherwise it's just a basic cop show.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment. I think some people might like the show and the show's stories better or worse than that, maybe. But overall, I think it's a good way of describing it. And I think the writing and some of the plotting was never considered the strength of the show. I think a lot of it does hold up better. And yeah, I definitely think the show holds up a lot better. And doing some research for our podcast here, I was looking at one of my TV reference books, and it was written, I think, in the 90s, and just after Vice had gone off the air. And it made a mention to the frequent use of the music, and said that the contemporary music would probably date it down the road in reruns. And, we could argue about that, and I think it has an interesting history in reruns, so maybe that's true to some extent. However, watching it today, like 5-minute scenes of, cops driving down the street scored to music, it does hold up to me. I think it's sincere. Like for some reason, and maybe it's hard to define, but the stylistic aspects of Miami Vice, like the color palette, the music, and everything seemed to have been done with sincerity at the time. And because it was first, maybe, or at least at the forefront of that, it holds up well. Whereas a lot of the things that imitated it and seemed maybe a little bit more self-conscious, they don't necessarily hold up as well. I think Miami Vice spawned a lot of like imitators and all sorts of different media, but Vice still stands out. And to me, watching it, it doesn't seem like they're just even if they are consciously emphasizing the style, which they were. It works, I think, because they were fully committed to it.
Yeah, and I think when you're defining the style, that tends to hold up better than the people who follow it.
Of course, yeah,
The Beatles hold up better than some of their contemporaries
right,
who followed in their footsteps. So it doesn't feel dated. I mean, exactly. It is of its time, but it doesn't feel like, I don't know, like a lot of other things from that period. Like, I don't know, Growing Pains felt more dated
right,
than this.
yeah,
Because Growing Pains was definitely imitating my.
of course, yes,
No, or I'm even thinking of like just sort of a lot of '90s TV, lesser '90s TV that you just it definitely seems of its time, like the way the credits look and the whatever. Something like 90210, I think, would be more
right.
dated than this.
Well, I think I make a distinction generally between something that's dated and something that's a time capsule or defined its era, and I think this is the latter. And also, I would say this that I just thought of while you were talking about that. We talked way back in the day about the great Chips,
Yes.
and I believe we talked about its possible political parallels and sort of like Chips as a reflection on early '80s
Mm-hmm.
America.
Right.
I think a lot of the elements of Chips and some of the things that you might think were political aspects of it, as ridiculous as it might sound to talk about that, go back and listen to the episode in our
Yeah.
archives, folks. But that doesn't hold up nearly as well as Miami Vice. And I think part of it might be maybe I'm just drawn to some more of the bleaker, more realistic kind of assessments.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, and this is something we can get into eventually, like if you look at Miami Vice as a body of work, and if you kind of watch a bunch of episodes and you're not watching week to week, I think you come away with a lot bleaker, darker look at the 1980s than you might think if you were just to look one episode and look at the opening credits and think about the music and everything.
Right.
And to me, that holds up pretty well as a commentary on, okay, you can interpret it both ways, and it glamorized a lot of this, but also I think it was kind of pointing out the darker side to us, and I think it did surprisingly well at doing that.
Yeah, I think so. And they at least played around the edges of like what was going on in Latin America at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and our dealings there, perhaps.
Right.
It might have been feeding the drug trade,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, and of course the darkness of it. And of we've made light of cocaine, but
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's right. The season 6
yeah,
Battle Network show Superstar returns to start off
Yes.
season 7, right?
yeah, on screen this time.
Yeah, that's right. This could be we could have a possible back-to-back baddie winner in the making.
Or back-to-back nominee at least.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes. Oh, that's right. Yes, it narrowly lost.
Yeah, I think it's generally not a upbeat show.
Yeah.
Despite all the flash and all of that, maybe that's why some of that works, because it's a contrast to the story.
Yeah. Now, I'll also mention that I did watch this show as we get into when it was on. And in more recent years, for a while, a couple of years ago, I was watching more of season 1 and season 2. But kind of in preparation for this, I've been watching more season 4 and season 5.
Yeah.
The later seasons, which I didn't watch as much when they were on. I kind of fell out of watching Miami Vice at some point. And I think that's kind of contributing to my general impression of the show, because I think a lot of people agree the first 2 seasons were a little bit different in tone. There was a little bit more humor, and they got some ridiculous storylines, but also some really dark storylines by the show ended, and really culminated in some pretty dark stuff.
My preparation was watching as much as I could of the first 2 seasons. I didn't quite make it to the end of season 2, but I guess partly because once I looked into it, because I didn't really watch it much as a kid, but and saw that like Michael Mann left after the second season, or left day to day.
Yeah,
I guess he was still some sort of figurehead, but it seems like there's a consensus that the show went a little downhill after that. But I'm still interested in seeing some of that stuff.
Yeah.
It just I did want to see it when it was kind of at its creative height, but also its height of influence.
Right.
Which probably is latter half of season 1 and then into season 2.
Yeah.
Although I guess maybe it was another one that became a sort of a rerun hit more than.
Yes, I think when it first premiered, I think maybe in between the first and second season, because the second season I think was its most commercially popular, and then the first season it was still kind of building a name, and then I think it gained momentum in reruns, and then by the second season it became a top 10 hit.
Yeah,
but
you can definitely see in the second season that maybe they knew it was on an upward trajectory. It seems to have a bigger budget.
Yeah,
and have the look down more.
Right.
Although I will argue with you always see when you read about it that Michael Mann supposedly had this no pastels rule.
No earth tones.
Yes, only pastels, but you can't.
Right.
I think that's a little bit of mythologizing.
I think so too. Yeah.
In general, yes, the pastels outweigh the earth tones, but sometimes they have to have uniformed cops, and in Florida, a lot of them wear brown or green. And,
yeah.
Or you just can't totally
Right.
avoid it. I think on a TV budget.
I can see
a movie, you could probably find a way to do it.
Yeah, like in the theatrical movie.
Yeah.
That he did.
Oh,
in 20.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it was like all earth tones,
yeah.
wasn't it?
Well,
it's all like blue and gray.
Yes, it was very bluish,
out.
and yeah. You're right. Yeah, on a week to week basis, I think maybe for like really big decisions and like important sets, I'm sure that was a directive, but
yeah, I did find myself fascinated by the sets a lot of times, because I'm just wondering sometimes, like, did anything really look like this then?
Yeah.
Not because sometimes they're on location and you can tell it's a house, and it seems like it's the same house a lot.
Right. Well,
the White House with a bunch of white railings.
Yeah.
and a lot of big windows. Maybe there were lots of those in Miami, but then there are other things where they're like offices or apartments where it's like wallpaper that's like purple with all those weird like 80s sort of triangles and stuff. And I'm like,
Right.
do people have this? I just don't know.
From what I understand, it was a little bit of both, and I don't know if it was a chicken or egg kind of thing.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly, the show influenced a lot of even the architecture and stuff there. But I think that the producers were diligent about scouting locations that would fit that aesthetic.
Yeah.
But also, I think they did do some dressing up of some of the areas too.
Right.
But I mean, I think that's an incredible thing, and something that we should mention is the fact that the show was shot largely on location. I think is one reason why it holds up too.
Mm-hmm.
I love like location shooting and television and movies, and in this one, in this series, there's some amazing shots of Miami, and I think one thing I've read too is just Miami was not quite the glamorous international hub.
Right.
I mean, you had the drug scene going in there, but the show really did a lot to boost Miami, and there were parts of Miami where they filmed where there wasn't a lot going on, which is funny because when you're watching a lot of these scenes, you're like, how did they get these shots? Because there's nobody around.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's not like shows that were shot like in in New York in the '70s. There'd be people all over the place, and Vice a lot of times, they're going through at night and the streets are deserted and empty, which kind of adds to the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I guess like South Beach was kind of run down and mostly old people, and Miami Vice helped revitalize that area, and now it's of course cool people central.
Yeah, which is funny, like a show about what a dive Miami is and how it's been infiltrated by the drug trade.
Right.
Wound up boosting the city.
Yeah.
And probably leading to an increase in the drug trade, arguably.
Yeah. A lot of lessons to learn about how not to do things.
Right.
How to recognize an undercover cop.
Yes.
If he has the same first name as a known cop,
yeah,
he might be.
Yeah, one would think. I mean,
and I think the Miami location too adds like elements to the cop show thing that make it visually unique, other than the things we've talked about. Just having water be such a part of the location, so that there are all these things with boats and speedboats, and even I think in the pilot there's like I think Tubbs, before they know each other, like Tubbs steals Crockett's speedboat, and Crockett's chasing him with his car.
Yeah.
So it's a car/boat chase.
I think they call back to that.
Which is pretty weird.
Yeah.
And I'm not like into boats anymore than I am into cars, but it is definitely a different element.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Sonny Crockett, Don Johnson's character, lives on a houseboat, which, was not necessarily unique to television, but it was a nice little touch. I mean, of course, Quincy lived in a houseboat, or Quincy lived in a boat too, but Quincy didn't have a pet alligator.
No, he was his own pet alligator.
Yeah.
The pet alligator is like one of my least favorite things.
Yeah, if you think about things that don't hold up as well, I think they kind of...
clearly they realize, I'm sure it was an expense and difficult. And they more or less phased it out definitely by into season 2.
Yeah.
He shows up like once.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what his ultimate fate was, if they ever addressed it or whatever, but...
Tubbs finally got his shoes.
At least they didn't do like a spin-off cartoon series about, Elvis. Put that on NBC Saturday mornings.
Solving crime.
Yeah.
Giving PSAs at the end.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to address like the origin of the show. Hopefully, I think everybody would know. Essentially, it's about 2 vice cops, one white, one black, one from New York, a Southerner, former football star. Sort of mismatched, but they're on the same team. They're fighting for good. Edward James Olmos Castillo is their boss, and they're working out of like the specialized unit in Miami. But there's the legend about the Brandon Tartikoff, the MTV Cops.
Right.
The legend is that he inspired the show by writing down MTV Cops, and I guess there's some dispute about that.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about, and maybe you can shed some light on this, maybe not, because the whole Anthony Yerkovich is generally credited with creating the show, along with Michael Mann. But I guess Yerkovich's story was that he was already working on this concept.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that gets me about this is like creatively, it seems like he left very early in the series and then didn't do all that much afterwards.
No.
And I looked him up, and apparently he owns a restaurant in Los Angeles now, kind of a swank restaurant. But I'm not quite sure what happened there between him and Michael Mann. It seems like kind of a mystery, like who was really responsible for more of the show, or
right.
But he clearly left very early on in the show, despite being the guy that created a lot of these elements.
So yeah, like you go into it thinking, oh, it's Michael Mann, Michael Mann, Michael Mann, and then you see the writers created by Anthony Yerkovich, and so then my writer in me was like, oh, I'm going to be on his side as I'm watching this, and
Hmm.
maybe he deserves more credit. And then I realized like he left after 6 episodes. Okay, plus Michael Mann didn't direct any episodes.
Right.
Clearly it has his stamp all over it.
Yeah.
We've seen one of his movies,
Yeah.
Well, especially from that period,
Right.
you can recognize that. But like Thomas Carter, who we've was in The White Shadow, and we've mentioned directed the St. Elsewhere pilot and a lot of Hill Street Blues and all sorts of stuff. He directed the pilot for Miami Vice, and came up with the In the Air Tonight sequence, and so he certainly deserves a lot of credit too for the feel of the show, I think. But I don't know. I know the movie. Yerkovich worked on the movie,
Which is interesting.
yeah, and I guess they had worked together like on some '70s cop show. And Yerkovich had been on Hill Street Blues.
Right. That's what I was going to mention, which is completely different
Yeah.
type of cop show in many ways.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. And I guess that's what he said, was that he kind of was intrigued by the idea of going to a totally different locale. And
Right.
boy, did he ever.
And like the undercover part of it. And there seems to be less information out there about this than you would think.
Yeah.
Like I was looking for like, oh, there's got to be an oral history of my
Right.
advice or something. And I couldn't find anything.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one thing that I've been thinking about is leading up to this is there should be a really good book about Miami Vice.
Yeah.
I think of all the TV shows we've talked about, in my top 5 of things, and actually one of them I know that a book is coming about,
Wow.
Love Boat.
Oh.
But there should be a definitive Miami Vice book pulling together, because of so many of the things we've talked about, the cultural impact and some of these like technical and creative decisions. But yeah, there's not as much info as there should be, I think.
And I think like if it were like a book by like a television, like a critic or something, or like an oral history, it could be really good because there are all these other, the kind of people that were guest stars and
Right.
the crossover with music and all of that.
Totally.
And fashion could lead to an interesting thing because like all of that, it is again, like you said, like the chicken and egg or it's like a feedback loop. Like clearly MTV inspired this and they were looking at like European fashion and things and trying to stay ahead of the curve, but then they're sort of defining fashion and then it's going back and forth. And I think that's an interesting way to look at the 80s that we're probably not going to get totally in depth because we're not experts in any of those fields, but that would definitely make a good book or a documentary, something.
Yeah, now maybe some of this, I don't own the DVDs. Miraculously, the entire series came out on DVD years ago with all the music intact, as far as I know, which is amazing, considering how so many shows were held up for years by music issues. But I'm not sure if the DVDs had significant extras. I don't really think they did.
Probably.
And so maybe some of that is on there, some kind of bonus material. I don't know, but
yeah,
if somebody's out there, please write this book. We'll buy it and read it and plug it and and encourage it.
Yeah. So speaking of crossover between different media, our episode is what we should get into.
Yeah.
Smuggler's Blues from season 1, which named after a Glenn Frey song and featuring Glenn Frey in a prominent role.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? So, and I guess Michael Mann was the one that was inspired, supposedly, right? That sort of instigated the idea.
I didn't know that.
That he was the one that like was intrigued by hearing the Glenn Frey song.
Okay.
I mean, if he had heard like Don Henley's "All She Wants to Do Is Dance," would he have told his staff to come up with a stripper episode or something? I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. Seems like Dirty Laundry would have fit.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe they used that at some point.
I think maybe they did. And what's funny is like in this episode, like a lot of the dialogue from the song, or the lyrics from the song make it their way into the dialogue of the episode.
All right. There's even a point, try to mention it later, where like someone asks a question and the song answers it.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And plus the whole phenomenon, which I love.
Yeah.
And it's not, the only time this has happened on Miami Vice is that, you have a character in the episode and you're hearing him sing in the soundtrack.
Right.
So Glenn Frey is not playing Glenn Frey, but
No.
there's a Glenn Frey song like you hear 2 or 3 times in the episode.
Yeah.
Which is great.
It is. That's right. Yeah, the Phil Collins one, they did that.
Yeah.
Although in that case, it might have the main song you hear is like the theme song to the TV show he's on.
Yeah, yeah,
So it might be Phil the Shill singing it.
yeah. You could definitely make that case.
Yeah.
And I think yes.
I don't know if there's a Frank Zappa song in the Frank Zappa episode.
No, and I don't think unfortunately the G. Gordon Liddy episodes didn't include any G. Gordon Liddy music either.
But let's quickly mention the music in general, though. The Jan Hammer.
Oh yeah,
the theme song.
Yeah.
More guitar in it than I thought.
Yeah.
And I've now heard it like 50 times.
Yeah. Yeah. The music was a big part. The theme song was great, and I did own the LP of the first Miami Vice soundtrack.
The one with "You Belong to the City."
Yeah. That was one heck of an album. Yeah. And I can't remember exactly all that was on it, but it had like 3 or 4 top 40 singles on the album, including the theme song itself, which I think charted. So
at some point, he released like a massive album of tracks, just scored instrumental tracks.
Wow.
That I listened to a lot of it on Spotify, and it was cool. I like the various things that they're, some of them are surprising. Mm-hmm. There's one in particular that sticks with me that is it's often used in playful things, but it like it just has almost like a loop quality to it. And one episode it was all about, they kept using it when any scene where Tubbs was getting involved with this woman who eventually tried to kill him, but this happens. Yes, these guys did not
part of the life. Yeah,
they don't have good luck with women at all. But yeah, in general, I think it's definitely what you would expect from Michael Mann production too, like moody and
yeah, that's definitely part of his influence. As you said, other movies of the time reflect that, and it's and one thing that it's easy to forget is that Hammer actually left the show.
Yeah,
and I was kind of surprised going back, like, oh yeah, he actually left the show, which it seems to be kind of unusual that he's so closely identified. You don't think of like the composer leaving like that, especially such a high profile one. But then Tim Truman took over for like the end of the show's run, and had some distinctive musical touches of his own. But it's really hard to think of Miami Vice without thinking not just of the pop music and the soundtrack, but the score.
Yeah, but then the pop music, I do think they make a lot of good choices.
They do,
but as a broader sort of swath of music than you might think.
Yeah.
Even though like the theme song reminds me of ZZ Top a little bit, to hear ZZ Top on the show was surprising. And there's R&B music and heavy metal sometimes. It's just a good variety of that period, I think.
Yeah.
And usually, especially in the montage, it's used very effectively.
Yeah, and they take like artists that I wouldn't necessarily be into and really make them effective.
Yeah.
To me, like somebody like Dire Straits,
right?
That I was never that big a fan of, but they use it very effectively. And
they use Brothers in Arms, I know, which is it's like a perfect song for montages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
has been used in them multiple times. Just the build of it and the mood of it and everything.
Yeah,
but in this case, it's Glenn Frey.
Yeah, Smuggler's Blues, which is in itself, it's a very entertaining song.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just Glenn Frey laying out. It's just a literal song. He's just telling you the lifestyle of a drug smuggler, and all kinds of different things. He gets into like the geopolitics of it. It's actually there's a surprising amount of breadth in that song, I think.
And a cool video.
Yeah.
Now, well, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but it's self-reflective in a way. Maybe him wondering about how the way today someone might wonder about, what are my eating habits? How do they affect the environment?
Mm-hmm.
Could he be wondering about how some of my habits affected the world around me?
Perhaps, yeah. Like, is he part of this system that's gone wrong? What's his role in this?
Yeah. Is he causing smugglers to have blues?
Yeah, perhaps.
Or was he? Maybe by then. I'm not. I think there's evidence that he might have dabbled in some.
I think he
substances.
I kind of wish you were around to answer that question, because I have a feeling that no matter what the answer is, he'd probably give a pretty entertaining answer to that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely worth considering, yes. But if he was very emotionally drained by the process of considering those things, he doesn't show it in his performance in this episode. There's a little certain amount of weariness to him, but he certainly embraces the role. And you could argue about his effectiveness as an actor, but He did get his own TV show later after
He
this.
did. What was that?
Was it South of Sunset? Something was South of Sunset. I think aired like one episode after the Super Bowl or something like that, and was kind of a notorious flop, like some kind of detective cop show.
Ah,
So really, this is probably remains the pinnacle of Glenn Frey's acting career.
yeah, or that gym commercial.
Yeah. Yes, check the YouTube playlist.
Yes.
Speaking of that, you're going to see, if you want to see Glenn Frey working out, you will get your wish.
So
Smuggler's Blues.
yes,
Should we get to the episode?
we really should.
I wanted to talk a little bit about about when it premiered and what else was on, because this kind of speaks to, we like to put things in context, and
Sure.
TV in general. This is going to go to a point that we've made already several times throughout our podcast run, but this episode premiered February 1st, 1985. It was about the midpoint of season 1 of Miami Vice. But Miami Vice was a Friday night show, virtually its whole run, and you'd think of it as like a Friday 10 p.m., kind of 9 p.m. show.
Back when people watched TV.
Exactly. So here's what else was on TV. So NBC, not all of it was gold, but NBC had bloopers and practical jokes at 8, which was very popular at the time. At 9 o'clock, V, which was very popular in my household at the time. At this particular night. This is the regular series.
The regular series,
yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then Miami Vice. ABC had Benson and Webster leading off the night. Street Hawk at 9.
Mm-hmm.
And then Matt Houston at 10.
Well, those are all of those shows at some point were very popular in my house.
Yeah, but they're legitimate shows.
Yeah.
Now CBS had the Dukes of Hazzard on, which I watched as a kid. Dallas, which was still huge. One of the top shows on TV at this time.
Yeah.
And then Falcon Crest, which is also very popular.
Right.
So I just want to make the point that this is Friday night, and Miami Vice, it almost seems like the classic, like today you'd think of it as a show that would do great in the demos, right? Like 18 to 34-year-olds, mm-hmm. people would watch it. You wouldn't necessarily put on Friday night because you think, well, young people are going to be out doing stuff.
Right.
However, a lot of people were watching TV at 10 o'clock, but even more of them, there were a lot of people watching Falcon Crest and Matt Houston. I'm not even sure Miami Vice won. I don't think it did. Falcon Crest was probably more popular this night. This is the first season. Dallas was by far the most popular show on Fridays at this time, but it was a big show that was on Friday. It was a legitimate night of television.
I just hope it beat Matt Houston.
You know what? I'm going to look that up. I think it was pretty close, to be honest with you. And one thing, not to jump ahead, but I was kind of dismayed. Miami Vice's ratings declined pretty quickly, and the finale, the actual series finale, which it did have, it lost to a movie about Jessica McClure. Jessica McClure, I think, was the baby that went down the well.
Okay.
Now, granted, that was a big story,
Right.
but a TV movie based on that beat the Miami Vice finale, which kind of offends me. It just kind of shows how far the show had gone down. But
yeah.
And one thing I'll say while we're talking about ratings is, I think it's generally considered that after the second season, part of the problem was NBC moved Miami Vice from 10 o'clock to 9 o'clock to go up against Dallas. Its ratings went down, and also the show itself got away from some of the lighter elements, and the tonal elements got darker, both thematically and visually, and wasn't quite the same. Plus, I think, writing turnover, whatever. So the show did decline during its midway point, partly due to the time slot change. But as we always talk about here, time slot are critical, and who you're going up against, something to keep in mind. But so this episode was Miami Vice kind of on the way up, but not quite established as the major hit it would become, or the big cultural impact. It was still kind of getting there. And it did run 5 seasons, 1984 to 1989, and it pretty much went back and forth between Fridays at 10 and 9. So for me, if it was like a weeknight show, like maybe it was on a Tuesday at 10 o'clock, I probably wouldn't have been watching it. But on Fridays, I could stay up and watch it. And I just, remember me and my dad would watch it, and good family show, sit back, kick back, watch Miami Vice.
If you're going to watch a show like that, if you're going to allow your kid to watch a show like that, because I don't know if I was told not to watch it, but I definitely didn't really watch it.
Yeah.
It seemed like it wasn't cool in our house to watch it.
Yeah. Well,
like I had friends who watched it, so was very aware of it. But if you feel it's fine for your kid to watching it with them, that's the important part.
Right.
So you can discuss the things they don't understand.
Right.
And explain to them, that just because Crockett and Tubbs shoot someone every week doesn't mean it's okay for you to shoot someone every week.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's good. I'm pretty sure that my dad made me write a 10-page essay about Colombian Peru's economies and the effect on the drug trade after one episode. So
that's good.
yeah, it was part of the process.
Right. And, I was watching this and I had to refresh my memory now on like South American geography because I didn't quite have Colombia placed on the map. And then I looked and I saw, oh yeah, it is kind of a straight shot from Florida.
Yeah.
To Cartagena.
Yep, nice and convenient.
Yeah. And it does go over Puerto Rico, as someone mentioned.
Yeah.
So now this episode begins with one of those sort of, well, like mini episodes, a sort of, not quite a montage, but a heavily edited teaser, stylized teaser. This one involves Crockett and Tubbs. They're following a guy, and he goes to a bridge over, I guess I forget what they call it, not a river, but like a canal, and he drops a cooler into a speedboat that comes under the bridge, and then he goes from there to a boat, and you can see a silhouette of a woman. She seems to be bound, and then the boat explodes.
Yeah, it's kind of a spectacular explosion.
Yeah, they like blowing stuff up on that.
Yeah,
they blew up quite a few buildings. Too, on the show.
And Miami Vice, as you've alluded to, it did have a television budget, but it was very high for its time.
Yeah.
And part of it was the location shooting, but part of it was stunts like this.
Right. And this is like one of those things where they must have had multiple cameras because it you get like the explosion like 3 times.
Right. Yeah, boy, if you're gonna if you're gonna explode a boat, you should get good coverage of it for sure.
Yeah. So then, cut to credits, and then there's a discussion in the office. All the cops are there, and some homicide detective who seems very not concerned with the whole situation.
Yeah, you think there's something odd about that?
Maybe. Well, we'll come back to that, maybe. But he says, it's a drug dealer. And the drug dealer actually survived. But his wife and kid, too? Or is a kid, I think a kid did. Yeah, because Crockett.
Yes. That's what gets Crockett's indignation up.
Right. They died, and so Crockett's mad about that. And
yeah, the lieutenant, he had kind of a blasé kind of comment about it.
Yeah.
Like, it's part of the game or whatever. And Crockett's like, the game doesn't include killing children, man,
right.
or innocent women and children or something. And
yeah.
So
as much as Crockett has been under, he's still got that,
Yeah.
He can be cynical.
Right.
But boy, he's got some earnestness to him.
Yeah, see, now I've been watching, like I said, a lot of the later years where he still has
out,
that,
right?
But he's burnt out and he's definitely more weary. And in the first couple of seasons, he's more passionate and seems to wear his heart in his sleeve a little bit more, and he's not quite as jaded by the whole scene.
Yeah, which, depending on what episode you watch, he's been doing it for, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years.
Yeah.
We do know, and we revisited in this episode, that he spent some time in Vietnam. Now, so this episode is 1985, right? You said?
Right, aired 1985,
yeah. So I think I was watching maybe a later season too, so that'd be 87. And he said he'd been doing it for 12 years. But there's also an episode that explicitly puts him in Vietnam in 75, like at the fall of Saigon.
Yeah.
So I don't know if everything, like he came straight home and became an undercover cop.
Yeah. Well, somebody with your skills, we could use you.
Yeah. Or maybe he was doing it before he went to Vietnam, and then he got drafted at age 25 or whatever. I mean, he was in college.
Because we know he's a college football star, yeah.
Yeah, and he blew out his knee or something.
Yeah, well, he's had a heck of a life either way, but yeah. Not entirely consistent, but...
And of course, I'm just assuming his age is the same as Don Johnson's age. But
yeah.
And of course, we are in the middle of the Renaissance.
Yes. Today we are, yeah.
Yeah.
But back then, yeah. So Don was in his mid-30s. Don, I'm calling him Don. I feel I've earned that right after watching as much Miami Vice.
Yeah.
But one thing that we can remind people is Don Johnson was not a star.
No.
He was more of a journeyman at the time of this show. So Miami Vice was what made him.
And he had a little bit of a rough life.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, I guess Philip Michael Thomas. I mean, he was around.
Yeah, he was like a solid working actor.
Yeah.
And his resume was surprisingly a lot longer than I thought. Just his filmography, just stuff he was in the 70s and 80s. And, you see stuff show up on the internet sometimes like, oh, he was on, a sitcom here or there. But
right.
Stage and screen. But by no means was he a star either.
Right. But this made them stars.
Yeah.
So good for Miami Vice.
Yes.
Anyway, while they're at this meeting, Castillo gets a phone call. And he says something about Crockett and Tubbs being the best. And then the three of them and Trudy. We haven't mentioned the other cops around, but there's Trudy and Gina, two female cops, and Switek and Zito, who are sort of the the anti Crockett and Tubbs.
Yeah, they often seem to provide some comic relief or kind of the lighter side.
Kind of slobs. And
yeah,
they do a lot of grunt work.
Right. They're yes, not nearly as glamorous as the two leads.
Right. And Gina and Trudy, they seem to either go undercover as prostitutes.
Yeah.
or they dig up files for Crockett and Tubbs.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of scenes throughout the series, right? Of especially Crockett, I think, like about to go somewhere and like being on the phone and one of them comes up with a file. They're like, thanks, and.
Right. Or like, could you go down to the records office? And
they don't even really come up with like the breakthroughs. It's usually like the guys come up with the breakthroughs and they just go do basic paperwork when they're not dressed up as prostitutes.
Right. And I find it interesting too so Crockett and Tubbs, even when they're just in the office, are decked out.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it makes sense when they're undercover that they would be doing that, but they're always decked out.
Yeah.
Right? The women, you think they would get to be. But they're not even like dressed like typical female cops on TV shows.
No.
Like, in pantsuits or something. They have like these very, very nice clothes.
Right.
Kind of these billowy summer dress things. And...
yes. Even if they're not out on duty or something, they just show up to the office like that.
Right. Like they're, there's almost like a 50s element to it or something. Like a 80s, 50s vibe to some of it.
That's pretty good, yeah.
Like Trudy will be wearing pants sometimes, but it's like pastel and like a tank, just like casual wear.
Right.
But not like cool. Like it's only when they're dressed up for undercover that they really put on the Ritz to sit.
Yeah.
But not really because they're being prostitutes usually.
Right. And how about Castillo's fashion? The short sleeved collared shirts with like the short ties.
Right. The black suit.
Yeah.
I forgot about the short sleeves because usually he has his jacket on. But
right. I love the scenes of him for some reason. I just love him with the short sleeves and
which Miami it makes sense.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean he pulls it off.
But and the narrowest tie possible without being a bolo tie.
Right.
And some of them seem like they might be leather.
Yeah.
Like he's like in a depressing new wave band or something.
Yeah. I like the idea of him just laying out like he's the kind of guy that gets like 5 of everything, and so he doesn't have to make a lot of decisions and just has one laid out each day of the week.
Because he's so, I think it just fits his like aesthetic of movement and everything.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if we ever see his house. I can't remember, but it probably has very little furniture. He probably already knows the art of feng shui.
Yeah.
He's into all these spiritual
right.
things. Like, he spent time in Thailand, we know, and from the episode we aren't airing, he has some connections to ninjas.
Yeah. I mean, he's actually got like a personal life, which is it's almost disappointing.
Right.
He's got he's been married and kind of all this other life before, because he looks like a lifer. He's the kind of guy you assume is like a total lifer.
Yeah, but they dole that out very in small doses.
Right, which is good. I mean, you don't want to overexpose that character because he is so awesome. Like, usually when he's just glaring at somebody or just acting by not acting, just by being there.
Yeah.
He always has a presence, and it's amazing that he wasn't even in that role at first. At the beginning, it was Gregory Sierra.
Yeah, it's a different
character. Yeah, and then they brought Olmos on like a couple of episodes into the show.
Yeah, I think right around the Yurkovich leaving period. I think it's maybe the same, or his name shows up in the credits for the first time.
Yeah,
and Gregory Sierra is more of a yelling.
Yeah, he's more of a. I think when you go back and watch, he's the kind of guy that looks more like the relic of the 70s and more of a cliche.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know whose decision it was to have the Castillo be the character, like as quiet and low key and simmering as he is, but it's brilliant because he plays off so well against everybody else.
I know who would tell you. It was his idea.
Yeah. Steve Allen?
Well, Steve Allen, in conjunction with Edward James Olmos.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. I did. There's a whole one of those Academy interviews where he described something, and I tried to identify it happening in an episode, and I didn't ever quite find it. But it involved him, his first day, maybe his first scene, and he wanted to have his door shut, and Don Johnson didn't want to have the door shut, and then stormed off the set for 2 hours and shut down production.
Wow.
But it's like 6 episodes into season 1. I just can't imagine. Like season 3, Don Johnson, sure.
Yeah.
But he already had that much swagger and power.
Yeah. And like the idea of everybody choosing that hill to die on that early in the show's run seems a little unusual.
Yeah. But then, so almost then saying that just there was so much tension, I just decided to use it.
Yeah.
And then he would do things like just, look at the wall and sniff the actors and weird things, which do seem like actor choice.
Yeah.
So I think there's some version of the truth in what he's telling us. It seemed possibly a little exaggerated.
This isn't necessarily a Castillo episode, although he does have plenty of scenes, and dialogue. So I think it's good that we talked about it a little bit because I do want to mention that when he's on screen, you can't take your eyes off him.
Sure.
Even with a lot of other stuff going on, and sometimes other characters giving like expository dialogue. He holds the screen definitely.
Yeah. Without
being showy about it.
No, he's not going to put his eyes on you.
No.
Definitely not.
And I'm kind of relieved, actually. I don't necessarily want that.
It might be a little intense.
Yeah.
So anyway, Castillo, Crockett, Tubbs, and Trudy go meet a DEA agent, played by the now great Richard Jenkins.
Yes.
He was just a workaday actor back then. But,
that's right.
Boy, if the Richard Jenkins of today had been that Richard Jenkins, he would be, for me, like a shoo-in for Robert Pine Award.
Right. That is brilliantly put, as always, my friend. And I would not have recognized him if I hadn't seen his name in the credits at the beginning of the episode. If I didn't know that was him,
it might have taken me.
I don't think I would have noticed it. Maybe at the end, but yeah, he looks a lot different.
Yeah. So they've been on the trail of. Apparently, there have been like at least 5 of these similar kidnapping/killings. So it's a family member of a smuggler. They get kidnapped, held for ransom, and then boom. And like once they get the money, the boom. And they think someone with inside information is responsible. So in a plan that makes really perfect sense.
Of course.
They want Tubbs to pose as the guy who was injured, as his cousin.
Yeah.
They want Crockett and Tubbs to go to Colombia with, I believe, $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And buy $1 million worth of cocaine and come back. And Trudy's going to pose as Tubbs' wife.
Yeah.
And hopefully get kidnapped.
That's right, as bait.
So that they can find this person.
Yeah,
persons.
Yes, we left out Trudy and Gina's other great roles to be bait,
Yes.
whether intentional or unintentional.
Right.
That
and Gina's role to occasionally be Crockett's girlfriend.
Yeah. So yes, as you described, it is a brilliant plan. And one thing I like about this is that as soon as like Crockett and Tubbs start asking legitimate questions about the logistics of all this, they're basically like, I don't want to know how you guys do it. Just go ahead and take care of it yourselves.
Right. Like transportation, all that.
Yeah.
Then to do that, there's like a weird scene because I feel like something maybe got cut out to set up that scene where they go to a hair salon and there are a bunch of people that are high and Tubbs somehow knows one of them through his undercover work and he wants to find a pilot.
Yeah.
And then Switek and Zito bust in and Crockett and Tubbs get this guy out so that they want to do them a favor.
Right. So right away, it's kind of convoluted right off the bat. This is just to get the plan in motion. They have to do this.
Yeah, it's like, who is this guy? What?
Yeah.
And the guy kind of says, oh, yeah, there's a guy, Jimmy.
Yeah.
He doesn't tell them where or anything, but...
Yeah, and...
It's just a guy, Jimmy.
And I think this guy was, as far as I know, this was his only appearance. Like, they had other informants that they used throughout the series on a regular basis, almost to the point of straining belief, you might say, straining credibility. But this guy, they just kind of manufactured him for this. And yeah, he leads him to Jimmy.
Right. And Jimmy is Glenn Frey, who...
Did you like the way we were introduced to Glenn Frey?
Oh, yes, I was about to get into that.
Yes, please do.
So he lives in a hangar. Mm-hmm. He's got kind of a loft built in the hangar, and they walk in, and he's up on or platform, loft, whatever. He's up there, just jamming away on electric guitar. Looks like he had a keyboard up there, too, so that's pretty cool. Now, the guitar, to me, strikes me as a very un-Glenn Frey guitar.
Oh, yeah?
Maybe in the 80s. I don't know, people are doing all sorts of things in the 80s, but... I mean, it's like a red, it's like a guitar you would expect, like a heavy metal guy, or even just maybe even somebody in more like a pop band to have.
Wait a minute, a red guitar? I thought there was no red allowed on Miami Vice.
I think red's fine.
Huh. Michael Mann must have missed this part of the.
I think red's fine.
I think that was one of his I think that was one of his dictates. Was no red and brown and
But brown definitely,
yeah.
and orange and yeah.
I think I was reading an anecdote about like somebody was saying that like a car was chosen and Michael Mann
It's
specifically said he didn't want red. It had to be like silver.
Yeah, it's definitely a red. I mean, it's entirely red. Like the fretboard is red. You don't always see that. Kind of like Prince's cloud guitar. You know,
Right.
it was like all yellow. It's all red and very angular and just to me not like something certainly the Eagles would have used.
No, but out of context of the show and of
Yeah.
Glenn Frey, certainly like a distinctive kind of like somebody picked like, okay, give this guy a rock and roll guitar, so
Yeah.
and somebody chose that.
Right. He's like, oh man.
Yeah.
And it does sound like it's like he's playing it on set, but I don't know if that's true. But yeah, it kind of looks like something maybe he would have picked up at a pawn shop, like the character.
Right.
So, just give me that. But yeah, they propose him helping him out, and he's sort of like, yeah, I don't ask any questions.
Yeah.
He just doesn't want violence, man.
Yeah.
Unless it's necessary. But
Right.
in general, he's had that scene. He doesn't need to revisit it.
Yeah.
He'll just fly him in, and when it's time to go, fly him out.
Sounds pretty easy.
Sure. Yeah.
Must be nice work if you can get it, I guess.
Yeah. And he's got a buddy, Wavy Davy, who makes sure the plane is okay.
Yeah.
He's a mechanic, and played by Richard Edson of various independent movies and guest shots, I think. I think that's another cool, because the show was shot on the East Coast, they got some different sort of actors than you were seeing on a lot of shows at the time.
Ah, that's a good point, yeah.
Like Richard Jenkins, too, I think he was from Rhode Island or something, so maybe he wasn't popping up on whatever, Hardcastle and McCormick.
Right.
Yeah, and then they agreed they're going to meet somewhere. You just tell us where to go or something. Like, is it a different place than here? I don't know. I guess it is.
Yeah.
And Tubbs leaves his car like somewhere, and he plants a gun under it, which is, we don't know what that's about yet. But
it's an old undercover trick.
Yeah. Leave your giant blue Cadillac in the middle of nowhere with a gun in it.
Yeah. Little insurance.
Yeah. And they fly to Colombia. No big deal.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
It's part of this great plan, and
yes,
you got to go where the source is.
In this case, what is the guy's name?
Oh, the Grosero.
Grosero.
Yeah, I think it's Grosero. I think.
Okay. Who somehow knew the Morales, who's the guy that got bombed, and is vouching for Tubbs.
Well, the drug trade is a very insular community, and they all know each other.
Right.
Well, actually,
they don't.
They
it's
got like
nice.
The families, and the
yeah.
It's almost like a parallel, I guess, to organized crime in New York or something like that. You've got different families that run different aspects.
Yes, different cartels and whatnot, and yet the Miami drug trade, nobody seems to catch on to the whole Sonny and Rico thing.
No, I always found that ridiculous.
Yeah, because half the time they're just being cops.
Yeah,
and then half the time they're undercover, and I guess sometimes they make a show of them getting arrested too, and then somehow they're back on the streets
to keep their cover.
Yeah,
but I mean, how lazy is it to make your alias be Sonny Burnett if you're Sonny Crockett?
Right.
I never bought that. And Rico Tubbs was usually like Ricardo Cooper.
Yeah,
Rico Cooper.
Yeah.
They, the first rule of going undercover: don't make it too complex.
Right.
You got to have something you can remember.
Undercover
you
cops
keep your story straight.
Yeah, undercover cops are a lot like stand-up comedians who become actors.
Yes.
Just use your first name.
Very true. Very
you
true.
won't forget it.
Yeah. I was just talking about Policewoman last night, and Angie Dickinson did a lot of undercover work, and I'm trying to remember I think her character's name was Pepper, but I don't think she went undercover as Pepper all the time. That might have been a giveaway.
But it was always a spice.
Yeah, sometimes it was ginger,
right.
Cinnamon,
right, oregano.
I guess the important thing is, being undercover, it's not just about your name and what it says in your fake ID. It's attitude.
Exactly.
And these guys can pull off attitude effortlessly.
That's right.
It's swagger.
And we see it when they're dealing with this guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They don't really back down at all.
First, they hole up in some crummy, I don't even know if it's a hotel. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Vacant building or what. Right. And then they go meet this guy out in public at a table, and there's like this weird little kid there, and
yeah, there's some kid running around.
Yeah.
it seemed like he was supposed to be. The idea was that he was like doing something like running messages to people or something. Like he was
I guess.
because they spent a
Yeah.
lot of they get a lot of shots of him otherwise. So
Right.
I think the idea is that he was employed by them somehow.
Yeah, I think so. Or just like his pet.
Yeah, yeah.
So they talk business and they don't quite come to terms yet.
No.
And then as they're leaving, like this woman runs up and she's concerned and she's speaking Spanish and all this. And they go into an alley and some guys try to rob them.
Mm,
And Mr. Peace, Glenn Frey, shows up
yeah.
and just wants to blast everyone.
That's right.
And then the cops show up and they arrest Tubbs, but Glenn Frey like points a gun at Crockett to make him leave.
Yeah.
And then they go up to the room or whatever it is, and they really have a big like an emotional bonding.
Yeah.
And Glenn Frey is pretty good at that. And they talk about their past in Vietnam and how many people they had to leave behind.
Yeah.
As he died and stuff. Crockett's like, I can't leave this one behind.
Yeah.
It's his partner, man.
That's right. To his credit,
And he's
not gonna
got
keep Tubbs.
either a tear or a bead of sweat running down his face. I'm not sure which, but it works. It's as you've said before on the show, though. You weren't a true '80s character if you weren't a Vietnam vet.
Yeah,
An '80s action character.
that's right. And here we get two of them.
You get to it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think
Played probably by two people who didn't go anywhere near that.
right. There's something just kind of like sort of like it's like a laid back jittery to like Glenn Frey's performance. There's something off about it, which I'm not like criticizing the performance, but there's something that the character has that sort of facade, but you do get the sense that there's something behind it, and
Yeah.
not just the fact that he pops out of the corner with an automatic weapon, but it's kind of an offbeat performance, I would say, which is it works for it.
Maybe because he says "man" a few times, it makes me.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of like Dennis Hopper, like
Yeah.
like that same like, oh, he's relaxed. Oh no, he's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like a dark side to it, like beneath it, and yeah, it does seem to go that way. But he's got kind of more of a pragmatic way of looking at the situation until Crockett says, "Yeah, no, we're not leaving, or I'm not leaving without my partner."
Right. And of course, he doesn't know they're cops.
Yeah.
And then they're kind of beating up Tubbs in the jail a little bit, and then this lieutenant comes and he's got his papers and he reads off all these terrible things he's supposedly done. He's like, so I'm going to let you go.
Yeah. Right. And
It's if you didn't have a rap sheet,
yeah,
I wouldn't trust you. But look,
Yeah.
but done all these things in New York.
yeah. So it actually helps him.
Yeah.
Establish his credentials, and he hopes that he'll consider him as a friend.
Right. Yeah.
Which kind of indicates, well, everything's connected. The law, the drug trade, it's all together.
And then he tells them where to go meet.
Yeah. that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So they go to this club to meet up with the guy again, and that is like a really weird scene.
Yeah, it's like the smoky filled.
Yeah, it's like almost like a David Lynch thing. I mean, that kid is there and he's just dancing.
Yeah.
And he's like, just he's shirtless and in shorts. It's just that's weird. And there's like a guy who's high, and there's smoke and lights and like a disco kind of atmosphere. And Grossero's just sitting at a table waiting for them.
Yeah, there definitely is a clear attempt to establish like an unsettling, atmosphere and show that Crockett and Tubbs are not in their element, and it works.
Yeah, and then maybe one of my favorite bits where we see the cocaine, right? He wants to give everyone to have a sample, but to honor the Morales family, he has shaped it in an M.
What a classy touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Crockett and Tubbs really play tough, and Tubbs tests it. You see that a lot on this show, people testing the purity of some little chemical thing.
Right.
But he doesn't trust his sample, and then they lay out the plans. They're going to go meet somewhere, trunk to trunk, exchange money. Tubbs gets to sample a random key, and that's how they're going to do it. So they do that in a cemetery, of course, just to be weird again.
Right.
And the kid is there again. And Tubbs opens the cooler, picks up the first key he sees, and tests it.
Yeah.
It seems like you would.
Yeah, make sure that there's something
pull
underneath.
one from the bottom, yeah.
Yeah, like
maybe the middle.
Kind of like, if I'm in the store, I don't pick up the first loaf of bread on the shelf. I go in the back or something and get something that hasn't been,
I mean, technically, the one in the back would be no. Oh, and the one in the back would be the older one, the newer one.
Well, I'm checking the date. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
And if I'm buying 20 loaves of bread,
Yeah,
I'm not going to use the one right on top to gauge the quality of the
probably
rest
not.
of the bread. No.
Yeah, and just like the grosero kind of looks at all the bills and kind of flips through them.
Yeah.
You're not just going to take one stack and assume, oh, this is all actual money.
No. But at the same time, you don't want to sit and count it there. That would be an insult too.
Yeah, yeah, especially that much money.
Yeah. That'd be a little time consuming, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Although I guess you could bring your whole crew and just have everybody, okay, everybody take a couple of stacks and we're not leaving until we count every bill here.
Do you think drug dealers ever, just to be petulant, will give them like $500,000 in ones?
Yeah. That'd be a great power move, wouldn't it?
300. Oh, I lost count. Oh. The ultimate power move, of course, would be pennies.
Yeah. And then to have like an underling, like under pressure, would have to count it, with like pouring down sweat, and pressured not to lose track,
Right. Maybe they have the counting machine and it's getting jammed.
Right.
But the exchange goes well
until
at the airport some people show up to rob them.
Yeah, that's
do
kind of.
Do you think those are Grosero's people or different people?
I was it's unclear. I thought it was actually different people. I thought it was somebody from like a competing.
Right.
I thought the idea was that it was just like, and isn't this the one like Crockett actually calls it like the Wild Wild West out there when they see stuff going on. I think it was meant to just be some like random stuff, like how dangerous it is that.
Right.
You can't even make a good drug transaction without some criminal coming up and accosting you.
Right.
On a runway.
But they get out and everything seems fine. They're flying back into Miami. They drop the cooler into like a lake or a pond.
Yeah, and Jimmy's got some kind of ruse that like he,
yeah.
In order to get low enough or something, he says he's got engine issues or something.
So like, and Wavy Davy and this other guy are talking to him on the thing. But then they're also talking to somebody on the phone. And Crockett and Tubbs, they like go to where they left the car and they fish out the drugs. And Crockett is like, I don't know why, but he's like, I mean, I understand why he's griping.
Yeah.
But he's also like telling us everything that's happened on the show.
Yeah.
While he gripes.
Like giving a big rundown of all, like, how do we get into this situation?
First we do this, and then we do this, and then we get this.
It's funny, like climbing out of the water with that seems to be like the last straw.
Yeah. And nobody came to help him out.
Of course, Tubbs is probably sitting there thinking, you weren't the one getting beat up in a Colombian prison. What are you complaining about?
Right. You just had to sit in the dumpy room with that weird guy.
And this actually might be one of the best times where, Crockett's famous no socks policy helped him because he didn't come out of there with like wet socks.
Good point.
Which is, really a bummer walking around with that. So
yeah. He learned that in Vietnam.
Yeah, that's right.
You never want wet socks.
Yeah.
And Wavy Davy and the other guys show up and they're involved in this whole scam.
Yeah.
Which I hate like pointing out plot holes or whatever, but I don't if they've been involved in every version of this. It just seems like a big coincidence. Or if they wanted that connection, then Jimmy would have been a connection and the DEA just would have, like someone else would have sent them to Jimmy. Maybe Morales would have sent them to Jimmy. Right. Would have connected the dots. But it just seems like, Crockett and Tubbs these guys got lucky that Crockett and Tubbs chose him as a pilot.
Right.
And then
it seems like they would have had to been cultivated. Wavy Davy and the other guy, they would have had to been cultivated long before this for this to really, and be waiting for just this moment,
right? As
opposed to it all happens to fall in place. That's you're right. That's one of the weaknesses of this story, I think.
I mean, unless this is the first time they've been involved, I don't know.
Yeah,
but it gets you to where you want to get. So another gunfight. That's Miami Vice. There's got to be a gunfight.
Of course.
Jimmy gets shot, but he's not. It's not fatal or anything. But that's the end of Glenn Frey on this show.
Yeah,
he just sort of disappears.
Yeah, and we hear Smuggler's Blues again for at least like the second or third time in the episode.
Least. I think it might have been in there. I think that's the third time. Okay. There's one more.
Okay. Yeah.
I was keeping count.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
But Trudy has been kidnapped, so that part of the plan worked great.
Yeah. Right.
She fulfilled her role as bait.
Yep. Excellent work.
Yeah. And they're trying to, I guess maybe they had a tracker or something, but they're
Yeah,
triangulating her position.
Right. They had some kind of she had some kind of device.
And they're waiting for a phone call about the ransom. And so they find her. She's like in a trailer on like a construction site or something. And she is tied to a bomb. So if she moves too much, it'll go off, but it's also radio controlled. And there's this whole thing about who's going to go in with the bomb guy.
Yeah.
Like Gina really wants to go in.
Yeah, the bomb guy's used to going in alone.
Yeah.
To his credit, he's not looking for backup or anything.
Right, yeah. Gina's her partner, so she wants to go in.
Right.
Castillo just totally no-sells that.
Right, he does.
And there's never an explanation for it, and she's kind of...
Yeah.
Crockett ends up going.
Yeah, he voluntarily...
Yeah.
It's like, Crockett going with him.
And they have the phone, like the forwarded to their phone, and so while Crockett and the bomb guy are working on the bomb, very carefully, Tubbs has to deliver the money and decide what to do, because they realize as soon as the guy gets the money, he's going to blow the bomb.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't give him the money, he's also going to blow the bomb.
Right. So what do you do? It's a classic dilemma, and actually, it's sort of interesting.
Yeah.
The way it plays out, right? Because he's talking to Castillo, and Castillo essentially says, "Well, I'm not there. It's your call."
Right. Yeah.
Which it seems legit to me.
Right.
Like I kind of liked it. It was kind of weird. Like he doesn't have a good answer for it. He's like, "Hey, I go with you on this one."
Right.
I don't think it's passing the buck. If it was anybody else but Castillo, I'd probably make fun of the guy.
Yeah.
But it is kind of an impossible situation. However, we know in television and movies, whenever there's an impossible choice like that, there is one surefire way to do it, to get out of it. That's to somehow rush the guy with the weapon and the device. And it totally invalidates what you've just been saying, because if you can somehow rush him and surprise him, it makes that binary choice moot.
Right. In this case, it means leaping off a bridge into a boat.
Yeah. Usually you'd think it works a lot better if you'd like, hey, look at that, and then just punch the guy. But this is a little bit more elaborate, but he still manages to get there before he blows it up.
You know, it's not a tall bridge or anything, but it's still, there's some risk there.
Right. There's definitely some angst.
If you land wrong, you're falling right into the water.
Yeah, it's risky, yeah. And it's a tough choice for Tubbs. It's cool that he kind of got to do this, I guess.
They get into a fight, and the guy's wearing like a wetsuit. You can't see his face. He does manage to, set the bomb off.
He does, yes.
And for a brief second, if we suspend disbelief, we think, oh, maybe nobody got out.
Right.
Because we don't know. And they're close enough, they can see the smoke from where they are. And then Tubbs goes ahead and shoots the guy at that point.
Yeah.
But then Crockett comes on and everything's cool.
Yeah, and he couldn't just shoot him before because he had a pressure. He was putting pressure on a device. Switch, yeah. So really, it was an impossible move, and Tubbs. Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, he did what he could, but he really didn't make any difference.
No.
The fact was they were able to get out in time.
Yeah, he did. I think the fighting stalled it.
Okay, that's fair.
I'm sure Trudy was traumatized, but we'll never hear of it again.
Yeah.
It's not a very serialized show at all.
No, especially not in the first couple of seasons. No. I think later they build up to some things and kind of hurts the show, but in some ways maybe a little bit, and helps it in others. But you're right. Yeah, they'll put this behind him. You got to. You got to get back out there.
Something else horrible happened.
Yeah.
Like I watched, like near the end of season 2, there's an episode that ends with somebody shooting himself right in front of Crockett. Maybe Frank Zappa. And then the very next episode begins with Crockett visiting a guy in prison who shoots himself with some sort of homemade gun right in front of him.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, that's one thing about Miami Vice is a lot of the like really ambiguous or bleak endings.
Yes.
This is actually qualifies as one of the happier endings. Oh, and we haven't. I don't think you've. You've given away the final bit of information.
Yeah. Well, we've got a couple things we're going to come back to. So the culprit is the lieutenant. Yeah,
Lieutenant Jones, I think is his name. Yeah. The imaginatively named Lieutenant Jones.
That made, because this was the second time I'd watched it. In like the last month, and it made such little impression on me, that character, that I had in my head that Richard Jenkins was the bad guy.
Yeah.
The second time I watched it.
Yeah, you'd almost think that they would.
Like, oh wait, no, he's standing there talking. Right?
Yeah. Lieutenant Jones had kind of what would normally seem like a throwaway scene.
Yeah.
Just a guy that comes in like representing the feds or something, or the suits.
Right.
A level above and annoying Crockett, but it turns out he was kind of masterminding a lot of this.
Yeah. Which, he would have inside information. So.
Which really, I think, though, it speaks to kind of like you can talk about like, Miami Vice, you could make an argument, oh, it's demonizing, Latin America and making everybody in Latin America look bad. Although I would argue, like, well, it's kind of reflecting a lot of the reality of it at the time.
Yeah.
But I think it also made the United States did not come out innocent at all. Throughout the show, you get corruption from local officials, state officials, federal officials, judges, law enforcement officers, politicians. And this is just another example of that. And I think it kind of goes to like a recurring theme of how, in a way, like they're not just up against, drug dealers, they're up against the system. And at every turn, there's some kind of obstacle in these guys' way.
Mm-hmm. And a general disdain for the feds.
Yeah.
Both by the characters and, I think, the show.
Yeah.
That they just don't get anything done.
Right.
Like, this is other than this ridiculous plan.
Yeah.
A fairly decent portrayal of a DEA guy. But so the other part is, there's, as this scene is ending, there's like an acoustic version of Smuggler's Blues, which makes it even sadder.
Yeah.
Those blues. And that's where Richard Jenkins, he can't understand the motivation for like a law person to do something like this.
Yeah.
And he pauses, and then the lyrics say, "It's the lure of easy money."
Yeah.
And then Tubbs says money
right.
too.
And
Castillo agrees. But,
yeah, it always is.
But it was nice because I know you told me you had a dream of like the characters addressing the soundtrack or like singing along to the soundtrack.
Right.
So this came close.
This is as close as you. Yeah. In a serious show. Yeah. Yeah, that was very nicely done, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I like this episode, and I think it was a good choice for us because you get them doing undercover stuff. And you get the music integrated and cool guest stars.
Right.
But it is kind of a mess of an episode.
It's very kind of, it's odd that it's like the bomb thing seems tacked on to a separate episode.
Yeah.
They didn't really need that. It's a little inconsistent with the whole going to Colombia.
Right.
It's weird to me that they did the whole thing going to Colombia and they had this bomb thing in the same episode.
Yeah, I think the going to Colombia is interesting on its own.
Yeah.
And they could have just done that.
Right.
And just had a normal, I mean, I guess the DEA still maybe would have needed to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
To give them the go-ahead to do that.
Right.
Just kind of some jurisdiction and things like that. But in the bomb thing, I guess, in theory, puts pressure on them to get it done.
Yeah.
Except for at that point, Trudy hasn't been kidnapped yet. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole, like, they don't, those things don't mix.
Yeah.
And the bomb thing is just, that could be interesting.
Right. To me, the episode's more about, like, atmosphere and just sort of like, okay, this is Miami Vice's show. This is the show's take on the international connectedness of it and actually getting them out of Miami.
Yeah.
Although I think it was actually shot in Puerto Rico, but close enough. It wasn't actually in Colombia, but doing something a little different, but it's sort of involving, conspiracies. And I think the fact that like things keep going wrong for them and the theme of betrayal, corruption. And there's an interesting parallel with the local corruption in Colombia and the corruption that we see is going on in the Miami end as well. So to me, that's what stands out about it. I think it's a good representative episode, although far from the series' high point. I think it's a good episode to watch if you want one episode to see what Miami Vice is about because of the way the music's done. And one song I'll mention too is the Lunatic Fringe by I think Red Rider is at the set piece at the beginning of is what we hear there. And I thought that was a good example of a song well used for the visuals and everything.
Yeah, that wasn't one I knew, but it worked in the context. Yeah, that's a solid episode.
Yeah. Now
it's cool for having Glenn Frey in it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Glenn Frey is cool necessarily, but
right.
I'm not saying he's not either.
We're not here to endorse Glenn Frey or we're not condoning it in any way.
But he was kind of
on him as he is.
He was on a bit of a roll in that period of time.
Yeah.
Heat Is On was around then,
and he went on to do You Belong to the City, which is probably his biggest hit. Is arguably I don't want to say it's as big as anything he did with the Eagles, but it's possible that maybe that did make him as much money because of being like years later and him getting all the. Is it arguable? I mean, he was doing Pepsi commercials, right? Or it was You Belong to the City was the soundtrack to the.
I was thinking Michelob, I didn't. Pepsi, that's right, yeah. And I mean, it was definitely a big hit, and of course he wrote it for the show. Mm-hmm. The season 2 premiere, and it's very well used as Crockett wanders around New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really fit. Like, I don't feel like Crockett belongs to the city.
Yeah, no, he doesn't.
Especially New York, but
right.
But it's still cool.
Right. So one thing I wanted to mention too is like with the recurrent theme of drugs, I think there's a theme of like sort of the futility of the drug war without being like
The Wire.
Really big political about it. It kind of just shows that and they're going after kind of the supply end of it, but really it seems like there's always somebody else that comes along after they take out one guy, and especially on this show because there's a drug lord every other week or whatever.
Yeah.
But one thing I don't remember, and I'm not sure offhand, that I'm surprised they didn't do. I don't think they ever did a storyline where one of the characters got hooked on the product or something like that. Although there's one character who was ultimately killed, but it wasn't his by drugs, but it wasn't his doing. It was somebody had him killed with an overdose.
Zito?
Yes.
Oh man.
Yeah.
But that was so he go to Crime Story. Was he on Crime Story?
No, I think he just wanted to leave the show. I think
okay.
John Deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always liked Switek and Zito, and that was kind of a real bummer. I think that might be the end of second, or maybe the beginning of the third season, or end of the second season, or something. But talk about a dark moment. I mean, that was a brutal way to kill, and I think it changed. I mean, Switek was kind of a goof, but it kind of made that character a little bit more serious and stuff. Yeah. But it seems like, if you were to tell me that they were making this show now with this kind of thematic, you'd assume, there's going to be a 3-episode arc where one of the characters gets hooked on cocaine and it causes problems all over the place. I don't think they ever did that. There's a lot of things where they just some of the episodes I've been watching lately, like they consciously decline or find a way to get out of using drugs at a party or something like that when everybody else is. Like I try to separate business from pleasure or something like that.
Yeah. What's that one you liked with the there's a waiter?
Yeah. So the waiter just kind of winks at them and says, "Well, okay, more for me then."
Yeah, and then you kind of see him snorting it.
Yeah.
The other thing I mentioned to you is my very not serious theory that Giancarlo Esposito was playing a young Gus Fring on early episodes of Miami Vice. He appears 3 times as 3 different characters. Supposedly, but one of them is definitely is a coca dealer, and there's a scene where he's stepping on the product, and he's got like a mountain of cocaine.
Right.
And Crockett comes in, and he throws it in Crockett's face.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's an interesting theory.
Yeah,
I'd have to do a little bit more research into that.
But he's never playing. Gus Fring, of course, is from South America. In these episodes, he's never playing a Latino,
right?
Or at least a person with an accent. But we don't know. There's a lot about Gus Fring's background that we don't know.
True.
If he can pretend to be a humble fast food owner, he could possibly be pretending to have an accent.
That's quite possible. It wouldn't surprise me. And there's definitely some holes in his resume.
Yeah.
That could be explained by some of this. So here's another question I asked for you: who's cooler, Crockett or Tubbs? I think one thing about the show is it definitely became the more of a Don Johnson star vehicle as the show went on. It seems like, and Don Johnson was paid more. He was considered the bigger star, and I think that was pretty consistent throughout the series. It wasn't necessarily a true 50-50 deal. But who do you think is the cooler character?
I mean, Crockett is cooler in the sense of temperament.
Mm-hmm.
And because he's a more experienced hand at all of this, and he tends to not. He does get emotional about things, but he tends to play careful a little more. And if there's a woman involved, most of the times when he's been involved in these doomed romances, they're slightly outside of what's going on. Not always.
Yeah.
But Tubbs is definitely a more just animated, passionate guy.
Yeah.
I mean, the very first shot of Tubbs in the whole series, he's at let's say a dance club, a club where a woman is dancing for an audience, and he's singing along to Rockwell's "Somebody's Watching Me" and throwing money and just and he's playing a role. But Tubbs is a little bit that way. He'll walk in a room and dance or something.
Yeah, I think Tubbs is the guy that would be more likely to be genuinely a part of this whole thing.
Yeah. And
one thing about Tubbs is when he goes undercover, he's the kind of the guy that always gets the cool accents.
Yeah. Probably for the best.
Yeah.
If one of those
Spanish and yes, but whether it be Haiti or Latin America or whatever world he's in, he affects the appropriate accent.
Jamaica.
Yeah.
All you have to do to signify that you're Jamaican is say "Cool running, man."
Yeah.
Or "man," I guess. I'm trying not to do the accent.
Yeah.
And he definitely he gets. I would say he gets more women than Crockett.
I think he does. Yeah. Crockett's the one with the more long-term relationships. He has an ex-wife and a kid who seem to come and go as part of a part of who he is, and he gets married in the 4th season. And Tubbs, I don't remember a whole lot more of Tubbs's previous life. It seems like they set that up at the beginning of the show, and then they kind of move away from that, and you have more stories about Crockett and Nam and everything. You know a lot more about Crockett's life than Tubbs' life. It seems like
Tubbs' big thing is, his brother got killed by Calderon.
Calderon.
And then he had this relationship with a cop played by Pam Grier, and she shows up in a few episodes, and that seems to be like the real romance of his life. They just can't get on the same page. But then he falls for various women they're investigating and stuff, and he actually ends up falling for Calderon's daughter. And I think in the end of season 2, he finds out she had a baby. That's his.
Tubbs is a real love at first sight kind of guy, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely always the guy, too, just like checking out the ladies. Making eyes and all of that. I think they're equally cool in different ways.
Fair enough.
I'm going to go with that.
Yeah. Why should we have to choose?
Cooler car, the original fake Ferrari. I guess it's a fake, but that they had to blow up because it was a fake.
Yeah.
Or the white Ferrari that Ferrari gave them.
Well, as you know, I'm not a car guy.
No.
But when I think of it, for some reason, I think more of like the white. Yeah, I don't know.
I think the original one is cooler because it's older.
Yeah, I tend to think more of the other one if I'm thinking of it, but I'm not sure why that is.
I like Tubbs' giant Cadillac.
But yeah, well, kind of more fresh in my mind is I don't remember the show having a series finale because I kind of fell out of the show by the time it was ending, I think. And some of the infamous Sonny Burnett storyline where Sonny gets amnesia and becomes like his undercover persona. Right. The show had kind of lost me by that point. So I watched the finale and there's some stuff like that we've been talking about. It ties together pretty well, I think. But it also includes a lot of elements from this episode. It kind of they go to a fictional country this time. It kind of shows like how weary they are. It has an actual finale though. It has actual closure to it, and I'd recommend people check it out. But I'm kind of thinking of like some final scenes with him and them in cars and stuff like that.
Yeah. But then just to be clear, this is a 2-part episode called Free Fall because it's a little confusing. As I found out, there were like 5 episodes that didn't originally air, and if you like, we're watching them on the Stars app, and so they're in order, and there are these 5 episodes after Freefall.
Yeah,
and apparently NBC burned off 4 of them later that year, and then the last one was controversial, and they wouldn't air it, and USA aired it the next year or something.
Yeah. Apparently the show went out on its own terms, but the ratings were falling enough that it wouldn't have gone on much longer anyway. And everybody was moving on, I think. It was ready to go.
I mean, Don Johnson wanted to be out.
Yeah, and I think he was...
by season 3
he was doing other projects and kind of not around as much anyway.
Yeah.
And if you look at, like, there's kind of those later seasons that I'm talking about, you look at some of the plots, especially like in season 4, they're just like, they're getting into UFOs and bull essence, shall we say. Distribution of bull essence. Zombies... all kind of weird things.
There's zombies in season 2.
Yeah, and that's a good episode. If someone the one with the Mod Squad guy, Clarence Williams, but it got a little ridiculous. I mean, if you just look at the summaries, you can see, okay, well, the show was probably declining and it kind of run out of steam.
Right.
To me, though, it holds up a lot better than I think people might think. And another point I wanted to make is, like with the reruns, I think like hour-long shows don't necessarily hold up as well in reruns for some reason. In Miami Vice, it seems like it's always been on the air, but it seems like it's exiled more to like more niche stations or networks or guy-centric ones. Like just in recent, for a while, I think it was on TNN maybe. When they were trying, USA Network was more of a general thing, but then it was like TNN or Esquire Network, recently, things like that geared towards guys or kind of emphasizing the stylishness and maybe like the male appeal to it, but you don't see it showing up like on a TV Land or something like that, which maybe hurts its reputation. I don't know if there's a cause and effect thing there or whatever, but it's not as much a fixture as like the sitcoms are, but I think it's as important as a lot of those more iconic shows.
Might just be a little heavy for TV Land.
True.
Can you segue from Home Improvement, which I'm sure is on there by now?
Yeah.
Miami Vice.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you can.
It's a kind of, but it's like Starsky and Hutch or something.
Yeah. You
could see, and I think is that the one? I think Michael Mann wrote like an episode of Starsky.
I think
was
so.
Involved with that show.
And both Starsky and Hutch directed episodes.
Yeah, and there's some similarities if you think about it with those series.
Yeah.
But Starsky and Hutch, you could see like showing up again, and Miami Vice just seems more adult and graphic in a way that. It just seems miles beyond Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll think otherwise when we eventually cover Starsky and Hutch.
Maybe. Were there Miami Vice? There weren't Miami Vice toys.
Not that I remember.
There were Starsky and Hutch toys.
Yeah.
But maybe Mego had folded by then, because they might have done it.
Yeah, I do think, other than like Elvis the Alligator, there really was nothing about Miami Vice that would remotely be considered like targeting kids.
Right.
Unlike like a Hardcastle and McCormick,
Yeah.
you could see that, like the car and everything like that. Those are
Right.
tamer shows.
Yeah.
But Miami Vice, people actually like die, and they just seem like the stakes always seem higher in that show.
Yeah. I guess my last thing is the use of the word vice. In retrospect, seems strange. I mean, they are covering all the vices, but most times it seems like, at least on TV, the police departments have a separate narcotics division.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's just maybe in Miami at the time that's how they did it. Different places have different ways of doing that stuff, but it did so I used to think, just based on that vice cops were drug cops.
Right.
And realize there was more prostitution and gambling and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Trafficking, I guess.
I kind of associate vice more in general with like prostitution and
Right.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's true. But yeah, the show, and we've talked about some scattered other elements, but basically it was a show about cops fighting the drug trade in Miami.
Yeah, right, with the occasional other.
Yeah, and occasionally having some small victories, but not necessarily winning.
Right. And usually stopping the bad guys by shooting them.
Yeah, I think it's stylistically very, very bright, but thematically maybe a lot darker than you might think.
All right. It's hard to do in audio, so I don't know how we end on a silent freeze frame.
Shit. Well,
devastating.
Yeah, we could just do that and think about what happened to us, or we could just like
let's ask
glare at each other.
Castillo what he has to say.
This episode brought to you by Jimmy's Charter Flights. He'll get you where you're going, no questions asked. Just keep it peaceful. Jimmy doesn't like violence, man. This episode also brought to you by Pastels. This episode also brought to you by Burnett Razors for that almost clean-shaven look. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.